Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to the media briefing of the Sars preliminary results of the revenue collection outcomes for the 2017-2018 fiscal year. My name is Fred Salimane. I'm the Acting Group Executive for Tax Compliance Risk and Case Selection in the Business and Individual Taxes environment, and I'll be your Program Director for today. Today marks a crucial event in announcing the revenue outcomes, which is supported by the remarkable efforts and contributions of our 13,500 employees, men and women who are dedicated within SARS, and of course, with support from large corporates, medium and small enterprises, as well as the general public at large. Allow me to introduce and welcome our panel for today. We've got the Honourable Minister, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene, as well as the Honourable Deputy Minister, Mr. Mondli Gungubele. We've also got the Director General of the National Treasury, Mr. Dondo Mokgojane, as well as the Acting Commissioner of SARS, Mr. Mark Kingen, and our Head of Research within SARS, the Group Executive for Tax, Customs and Excise Institute, Dr. Randall Carlson. Amongst our key stakeholders for today, we've got the Deputy Director General of the National Treasury, Mr. Ismail Mamoniet, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of the Tax Ombudsman, Advocate Eric Mkawane. Unfortunately, we also did receive certain apologies from some of our key stakeholders who could not make it today. That includes colleagues from the FIC, the Financial Intelligence Center, Audit Committee members, the Auditor General, as well as the Tax Ombudsman. Furthermore, allow me an opportunity to introduce the SARS leadership to you. With us today, we've got members of our Executive Committee, starting off with Mr. Hlengani Matebula, who's the Chief Officer for Governance, International Relations, Strategy and Communications. You're welcome to raise your hands, sir. We've also got Mr. Fabian Murray, who's the Acting Chief Officer for Business and Individual Taxes. We've got Ms. Mogola Makola, who's the Chief Officer for Enforcement. Ms. Refilwe Mokwena, who's the Chief Officer for Legal Counsel. Mr. Luther Libello, who's the Acting Chief Officer for Human Capital and Development. I believe one of our colleagues unfortunately couldn't make it today, the Chief Officer for Customs and Excise, Mr. Tebogo Mokwena. I would also like to welcome members of SARS management present with us today, and to also acknowledge the hard-working men and women of SARS who unfortunately couldn't join us here, but are following us in terms of via either the television sets or satellite in terms of video, who are at our branches, our contact centers, our ports of entry, as well as our borders. Before I proceed, also just to acknowledge probably one of the most important personnel in any organization. That's our Chief Financial Officer, or the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Johnson Makubu. Last and most importantly is to also acknowledge and extend a very big welcome to our colleagues from the media. Thank you for joining us today and being able to partake in this incredible and momentous occasion. Before we proceed too far, I'd like to make mention to say it is further a privilege to welcome all the other senior members of the organization and staff, The collection of revenue paid by hard-working South Africans and consumers enables our hard-earned democracy. Significantly, today's media briefing coincides with the untimely passing of an icon of our democracy and one of the architects of South Africa's liberation. The mother of our nation, Mamunomzamo Winifred Madikizela Mandela. Winnie Madikizela Mandela paid a personal price for our democracy. I would like us to take a moment to please bow our heads in a moment of silence to pay our respects. Thank you. More importantly, to the members of the media, we do understand that it's not often easy to get such a high-level delegation together at one place. And I'm sure you have many, many questions that you would like to ask. Be that as it may, we have ensured that we do have a question and answer session at the end of the presentations, of which I will brief you on further near the end. And I would like to just take this moment, an opportunity to express to yourselves that today is about the revenue collection outcomes. And as such, we would gladly appreciate if we can please direct our questions along those lines. Of course, there are other pertinent issues of which you are welcome to ask about, and we will ensure that various other avenues are made available for you to engage on those particular questions. In terms of the order of events for today, they will include opening remarks from the Acting Commissioner, Mark Kingan, followed by an address by the Minister of Finance, and lastly, we'll have a technical presentation on the preliminary revenue results shared with us by Dr. Randall Carlson. And thereafter, we'll conclude with a question and answer session. I'd now like to take the moment to please call upon the Acting Commissioner for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Fred, and for your introduction. Minister, Honourable Minister of Finance, Honourable Deputy Minister of Finance, the DG of National Treasury, our colleagues from National Treasury as well as the CEO from the Tax Ombud, members of the SARS Exco and SARS management that are here and across the country, our SARS colleagues across the country, many people doing their job as we sit here, fellow citizens of South Africa, the members from the media that are here present today, special welcome to you to today's preliminary revenue collection results. In my capacity as Acting Commissioner of SARS, I may say a role that I'm very humbled to have been entrusted with, a role that I've accepted with the view to continue being in service to our country and making my contribution where required. The South African Revenue Service, which has gone through some pain in the recent past, remains a solid organisation. Its foundations are strong, its systems are robust, the people of SARS are resilient. Amidst negative publicity in the last while, including leadership changes, refund delays that has been in the media, the Tax Ombuds's report in that regard, amongst others, we as employees of SARS have continued working and will remain with our shoulder to the wheel, focused on our role and our mandate. I may say I'm proud of our staff. The mandate of SARS is clear. It is to collect revenue, towards our government's developmental agenda, towards a flourishing South Africa. If SARS does not work, the country stops working. Our role is critical, and I can assure you that the 14,000 men and women of SARS knows this. Our focus going forward is to restore credibility, and in particular our relationship with the taxpayer. Be it with the person who owns the spaza shop who consumes and trades with VAT-rated products, to medium-sized business owners who aim to make their first million in annual turnover and has maybe pay-as-you-earn obligations, to the large business that is out there who have their own specific corporate tax and PAYE, VAT and other requirements, to traders who require a seamless, simple and burdenless customs and excise system that does not hinder their flow of trade, to ordinary South Africans who have to register for tax for the first time, to people with a disability who need to file a tax return within difficult circumstances, to high net worth individuals with offshore assets. To all these categories of taxpayers, we at SARS want to make meeting your tax obligations as simple and burdenless as possible. We want to provide you with an excellent, a fair and professional service whenever you contact us, whether that be via the contact center, at our branches, service points, our points of entry, as you interact with our systems such as e-filing and the mobile filing services. We know that if we do this, people will have a different view of paying tax, a patriotic one, which it is about doing the right thing and knowing that the country's revenue authority or tax collecting agent will make it simple through its professionalism, fair and equitable treatment of a taxpayer without fear or favor. We want to get back to the basics and simply do what is right. And I must emphasize that. That is what my commitment is, to do what is right. What do those basics include? Well, it's to obviously look at the skills within our organization, the skills that we need to fulfill our mandate, to deal with the challenges we have with regards to transfer pricing, base erosion, profit shifting areas linked to illicit financial flows. We'll always find the exit of skills happening, and we need to deal with that and find a better way of handling that, a better way of empowering our staff to do and deal with the challenges that they face in dealing with taxes in the country. Obviously, some of the other basics that we need to look at is obviously the Davis Tax Committee recommendations that they've made, and SARS will be doing that and has in fact already commenced doing significant analysis on what is needed to be done there. We'll also turn our focus to key areas of dealing with small business, large business, and maybe the time is coming that we need to review how best we do serve this business and make sure that we are serving them end to end. Dealing with estates, the administration of estates is some of the basics that we need to get right, that we deal with them in the optimal way that focuses on remembering that there's a beneficiary behind the scene. Looking at high net worth individuals and how they contribute to the fisc as a whole. Looking at recognized controlling bodies, as they call the tax practitioners, we need to find a way to work closer with tax practitioners and utilize their areas of focus to obviously deliver on our mandate, but to ensure that we are also entrusting with them in terms of the service that we render them. I'm sure that the tax ombudsman represented here today is dealing with obstacles relating to refunds, especially diesel refunds, which continue to be one of the focus areas that is of concern. Looking at illicit financial flows, and there's a whole host of aspects that we need to do there. What I want to just say is that both myself and our organization is committed to look at these various areas that may be hampering revenue on the one side, but hampering service on the other side, that we do what our business is of collecting revenue with excellence, that we do it with absolute professionalism, that we put our utmost into doing what's right for our people, and that is what we as an organization are recommitting ourselves to do today. Before I hand over to the Minister in a moment to deal with the actual announcements relating to revenue, I do want to just allude to the fact that this weekend we introduced the increased VAT rate to 15%. And our first transaction for VAT at a border post took place at 5:21 a.m. on Sunday morning, and it was successfully transacted at that point in time. And a significant amount of transactions have happened. So the team was ready, and I do want to express my thanks to the team that has done that to ensure that we are fully ready for the VAT rate adjustment that took place. In terms of the sugary beverages levy, we were also ready for that, and our first transaction happened later on Sunday afternoon, where we collected our first levy in that regard. So we have been ready in terms of these two key areas that were announced by the Minister in time past, and we are continuing to commit to deliver in terms of our mandate. But I do want to thank especially the members of the tax-paying fraternity for all that they have done in ensuring that we can do what and deliver in terms of our mandate and what the Minister will be announcing in a few minutes' time. But we cannot do all of the above without taxpayer morality. Without taxpayer morality, i.e. paying tax because it's the right thing to do towards building our country, we do not have tax compliance. While the economy and efficiency of SARS are key drivers in collecting revenue, they form the last dimension of working revenue process. Taxpayers are the key determinant in the social compact to build and grow our country, ensuring improved living standards and equitable distribution of resources. Without taxpayers doing the right thing, we cannot do the right thing, which is spending on basic and essential services. This is the deal we make as government and citizens. We want to thank all taxpayers for their patience during the last while and their continued faith and trust in SARS to safeguard their personal information and funds. We remain humbled by this and at your service. I want to especially thank the Minister of Finance, the Deputy Minister of Finance, the staff of National Treasury for their support and absolute faith they continue to place in SARS. We will not fail you, Minister. It is our intention to do our best to deliver in terms of our mandate. A new dawn truly awaits us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kingan. Thank you to the Acting Commissioner. Before we call upon the Honourable Minister to join us at the podium, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our Chief Officer within SARS, responsible for Digital Information Services and Technology, that is Memamate Makgekge Mokwane. Also in our presence is the Chief of Staff from National Treasury, Mr. Marlon Geswind. Now I'd like to call upon the Minister to please join us at the podium with an address.
Thank you, Fred. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In my culture, when people are greeted, they respond. And when people don't respond, it means they are unhappy with your presence. But, and thanks, Fred, for calling on us to reflect on the passing on as the country mourns the passing on of our nation's mother and struggle icon, Mama Winnie. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's media briefing on the preliminary outcome of revenue collection for the 2017-2018 fiscal year. We spent a bit of time this morning debating whether I should be doing this or whether Mark should be doing this. And I can confirm that the matter was delegated upwards for the reasons I will explain later. Partly because of my age, when things get tough, you delegate, tough announcements to an elderly person in the room. Our announcement today follows the State of the Nation address and our budget speech as one of the most important dates on the country's fiscal calendar. Today, we report the amount of revenue that Sars has collected during the last fiscal year on behalf of taxpayers for spending on government's programs towards economic development, growth, job creation, and the provision of basic services, as well as, importantly, arresting spiraling debt. There is, of course, a new optimism in our body politic and economic environment that we need to acknowledge, embrace, and harness. On the 23rd of March this year, Moody's reaffirmed South Africa's long-term foreign and local currency debt rating at Baa3, and also revised the outlook to stable from negative. And this is largely based on decisive actions that our President and his administration has taken to place us on a better trajectory towards growth. The South African Revenue Service has collected an amount, if I were to pause a bit and, pluck the courage to say the number, it's written in two ways. It's written in billions and in trillions. Sars has collected an amount of 1.216 trillion, or 1,216.6 billion rands in the financial year 2017-18. Should be noted that these are preliminary results which will be subject to final audit. The preliminary result is very close, within the 0.06% to the forecasted estimate of 1.217.4 billion announced by the Minister in the budget speech 2018. It represents the growth of 72.4 billion rands, which is 6.3% compared to last year's revenue. Sars collected a gross amount of 1,451 billion rands, which was offset by refunds of 234.3 billion rands, resulting in net collections of this 1.216 billion. I would hazard to say, under the circumstances, well done to SARS and the people of South Africa who made this possible. This revenue injection represents money that comes from ordinary, as Fred and Mark have said, hard-working South Africans, and demonstrates our resilience as a nation to overcome obstacles and challenges, and our commitment to protect and deepen our democracy. Revenue collection is driven by the state of the economy, as we all know, the fiscal policy choices that we make, administrative efficiency, and tax morality, which determines taxpayer compliance. As much as the performance of any tax administration is premised on the economy, other key determinants are business and consumer confidence and the credibility of the tax administration. The 2017-18 financial year was characterized by distinct and clearly delineated growth patterns. Until December 2017, revenue in aggregate grew by 6.2% year-on-year. For the period December 2017 to February 2018, revenue growth on a month-on-month basis accelerated to between 9.5% and 15.5%, strengthening aggregated year-on-year growth to about 7.3%. This strengthening, ladies and gentlemen, of revenue growth during the 3-month period can be attributed to a number of things. One, an improvement in business confidence to levels last seen in 2015, resulting in improved profit outlook and hence provisional payments. Two, strengthening of commodity prices, which buoyed company income tax from especially the mining sector in December 2017. And thirdly, Purchasing Managers' Index, which indicated a recovery in the manufacturing sector, which translated in improved company income tax from this sector. And the fourth reason is stronger currency towards the latter part of 2017, which assisted companies with imports, which benefited our trade taxes. The slower recovery of consumer confidence resulted in lower domestic VAT as more citizens elect to reduce household debt. As a result, domestic VAT grew at a muted level of 4.5%, well below the 8.1% growth seen in the previous year. Business confidence is yet to translate into higher employment numbers and significant growth in the wage bill. As a result, our pay-as-you-earn, the largest contributor to Sars tax portfolio, came in at 8.6%, significantly below the 9.2% levels experienced in the past 2 years. Revenue collections on a month-on-month basis contracted in March 2018, driving down the aggregated yearly growth to 6.3%. Dividend taxes contracted by 3.9 billion rands in relation to prior years. In the prior year, companies anticipated an increase in the dividend tax rate, which changed from 15% to 20% effective 22 February last year, which declared an ordinary high dividends. Due to the shorter business month in March, customs had to close their statements 2 days earlier than normal, shifting about 1.8 billion to the next financial year. Domestic VAT from large business came in flat in March 2018, deviating from the growth trajectory established during the course of the year. The main sources of revenue that contributed to the 1.2 trillion collected were personal income tax, value-added tax, and company income tax, with personal income tax contributing 462.5 billion rands, which is 38%, and VAT contributing 297.8 billion rands, which is 24.5%, and company income tax contributing 222.2 billion, which is 18.1%, and customs contributing just a little less than 50 billion at 49.4 billion, which is 4.1%. Every year, SARS implements a number of comprehensive initiatives to optimize revenue collections. The short-term special voluntary disclosure program, which was initiated to offer taxpayers the opportunity to declare offshore wealth, raised 2.9 billion rands in taxes in the financial year from 827 processed special voluntary disclosure program applications from the 2024 applications that were received. The ongoing voluntary disclosure program will continue to perform well and has realized it continues to perform well and has realized 10.8 billion in total since its inception, or since it was launched in 2012. SARS collected about 800 million from the National Prominent Business Individuals Project. This initiative was developed to ensure an end-to-end view of a taxpayer's business profile and hence tax liability. That's the one that Mark spoke to. Invoking paragraph 19, sub 3 of the 4th schedule of the Income Tax Act, SARS may request additional payments from provisional taxpayers based on the latest estimates of the their financial performance. This year, SARS collected 10.7 billion rands from this paragraph 19.3 interventions. For any tax authority, tax compliance is one of the key determinants of its revenue performance. SARS has therefore seen deterioration in compliance as indicated by the overall growth in outstanding returns across all tax types. More concerning, though, is the increasing tendency of business to withhold taxes such as VAT and pay-as-you-earn collected on behalf of SARS. Therefore, SARS has stepped up its outreach and enforcement programs, and the call centers and offices made over 1 million outbound calls to taxpayers. The SARS Outstanding Returns campaign will be boosted this year to bring this matter under control. SARS is also collaborating with the Department of Justice to expedite the prosecution of tax offences. Despite this decline in compliance, the majority of taxpayers continue to pay their tax obligations diligently. The 2017 GDP growth projection has been revised upwards to 1%, which is higher than the 0.7% expected at the time of the medium-term budget policy statement last year. We are anticipating growth of 1.5% in 2018, rising to 2.1% in 2020. While this is a good start, there are immediate policy interventions that we need to make to ensure that we create the right environment for investment growth and employment. Government has made significant changes to the fiscal framework, including revising our expenditure ceiling downwards from what was presented in the MTBPS last year. New tax measures such as higher VAT rate, as Mark has alluded to, and below inflation adjustments to personal income tax brackets, as well as implementation of the sugary beverages levy, took effect a few days ago. The VAT hike is anticipated to raise an additional 22.9 billion rands. The role of SARS cannot be overemphasized. 90% of our budget comes from the revenue collected by the South African Revenue Services. Let me repeat, I said 90% of our revenue. This massive contribution forms the basis of our fiscal framework and is critical in consolidating our national sovereign debt. One of our focus areas should be to restore and rebuild public trust and credibility with taxpayers, with traders, our stakeholders, our partners, and all South Africans. It is therefore critical that all taxpayers and citizens always have full confidence that every cent provided to the fiscus will be well spent and that they will all be treated with the highest levels of service, with dignity, respect, and fairness. In turn, tax morality determines tax compliance. If South Africans play their part by paying taxes, government is also better placed to play its part in delivering services effectively, and also vice versa, if I were to say so. This is the social contract between government and citizens. Thank you to the Acting Commissioner, thank you, Mark, and the SARS Executive Committee for their leadership. My appreciation goes to the 14,000-strong SARS staff who, despite a difficult climate, continue to ensure that government has financial resources to deliver a better life for all in South Africa. Their dedication inspires all of us and makes me proud to be their minister. As I always say, it is when things are working well that we are all happy to be parents, and when things are not working well, those kids might as well be orphaned. I hope that today's announcement and the manner in which SARS has achieved this milestone under difficult circumstances will restore some trust and credibility in our government and its revenue authority. Finally, let me again thank South Africans, each and every citizen, consumer, business owner, every taxpayer and trader who paid their fair share of their tax, and I hope all in this room belong to that category, unless you can prove me otherwise when we step out. By contributing to the revenue that we have collected this year, and thank you for your attention. And I spoke this long because I was trying to answer the questions that you were going to ask.
Thank you very much, Minister. Another round of applause, please. Next, we're going to listen to the technical presentation to be delivered by our Head of Research and the Group Executive for Tax, Customs and Excise Institute, Dr. Randall Carolson. Over to you, Randall.
Thank you, Fred. Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, colleagues, friends, and the media. Welcome to this presentation. We are distributing media packs which contain this presentation, the speech of the Minister, a full media statement, I think also the Acting Commissioner's address. In essence, therefore, my presentation is mostly a visualization of what the Minister has articulated, and hence I would skip through it fairly quickly. There will be ample opportunity afterwards to engage myself and some of the other technical people on some of the matters that may require further discussion. So as the Minister's pointed out, the drivers of tax revenue, it's in essence the economy, and also the sentiments that are prevalent in the economy, business confidence and consumer confidence, tax policy, the extent to which you can still continue to raise taxes before you encounter resistance, taxpayer compliance, which was referenced by the Minister, and then of course administration efficiency, the efficiency with which Sars operated. So very important for us to look at of course, the full macroeconomic picture that prevails, and based on the macroeconomic forecast and outlook, we would then determine what would be then the expected taxes that can be collected. I've highlighted the following two macroeconomic indicators, is Business Confidence Index and the Consumer Confidence Index. The Business Confidence Index has been the highest since March 2015. Why is that important? It's important because to a large extent it reflects the mood of the business environment. It makes them decide whether to invest or not to invest. It makes them decide whether to disperse their surplus cash as dividends or to use it as investment. They make import and export decisions based on the confidence that they feel. And of course, this then in turn affected the taxes. So the provisional payments, the outlook on dividends, and all of those things are therefore a result of the degree of confidence that business has for the future. Similarly, Consumer Confidence Index deals mostly with the confidence of consumers to the extent that they wish to spend their money or whether they have rather pay off their debts. And we see that that has been pretty volatile, and therefore it also to some extent reflects in the taxes that we collect from consumption taxes. You will notice later on, as part of the discussion, that our domestic VAT had been rather muted over the past year. This presents a long-term view of the main tax indicators. We will see that prior to the financial crisis, when we had a contraction of about 4.1% in revenue, we had quite strong compound average growth rate of above 12%. Post the financial crisis, unlike many other countries, we recovered fairly quickly, although the compound average growth rate then became a little bit more muted and receded to about 8 or 9%. Tax to GDP also during the financial crisis slipped down to about 24%, and we have recovered and we are now maintaining it close to 26% at the moment. We should say, however, that this year's tax buoyancy is below the long-term average of 1. It's at 0.94. What that means is that we are growing slightly behind the growth of the economy, especially with the reviewed and estimate and the positive outlooks that are prevalent now at the moment. So this is the three distinct growth patterns that was observed that the Minister referred to. So prior to November, on average, we were growing revenue at about 6%, which was rather pedestrian. And then December, January, and February, we had relatively strong growth. We saw that the aggregate growth figure of the year then improved to about 7%. In March, we had a contraction in revenue, and therefore the contraction therefore resulted in a final year outcome of about 6.3%. The Ministers also referred to the reasons for those contraction, and it is also in the media statement. But primarily it was driven by much lower dividend declarations than what we expected. It also dealt with the fact that customs had to close off 2 days earlier, and we had domestic VAT that from large business that also receded in this particular month. So up till February, we were well on track to actually exceed this target, and then the results in March, they just braked us a little bit. This just speaks to the different taxes, the contributions to the full tax take, and a comparison of growth rates between this year and last year. Of importance, as was mentioned earlier, pay-as-you-earn, which is our biggest contributor, grew year on year only at 8.6%. Last year it was 9.2%, but in prior years we had growth levels of well over 12%. And this speaks to the constrained workforce environment. The other tax worth noting is, of course, the dividends tax, which contracted. Just to get this figure right. Which contracted in the last month, and it yielded about 3 to 4 billion less than what we expected. Also important, the net VAT is growing rather at a pedestrian pace of only 3%. We are used to growth levels of around 8% in domestic VAT, and of course that brings down the total net figure. I also should mention that the spurt that we saw over the 3-month period from November to December was also driven by increased imports, and we had some quite impressive liftoffs in our trade taxes for that particular period. So tax policy, I won't go too much into this. This was pulled directly from the budget documents. It was anticipated at that particular time, prior in 2017, February 2017, that these budget proposals would yield 28 billion rand. It did not fully translate because the economy wasn't coming to the play. A large part of that was personal income tax proposals, and that's we will have to look at that very carefully going forward to make sure that we collect these monies. Tax compliance was referred to quite extensively. We see a general decline in compliance across all taxes, but what's especially worrying are those taxes that are collected on behalf of SARS, the so-called agency taxes. This is pay-as-you-earn, that's collected by employers on our behalf, as well as VAT. And you can see for yourself that the compliance levels dropped for pay-as-you-earn from about 84% to just under 69%. When we identified this to be a big problem, we have launched an extensive outstanding return campaign. And as you will see the next slide, that the people that do actually submit their returns actually do pay well also. So the minute people submit their returns, the payment is almost automatically. So it's therefore important that we address outstanding return as a key determinant for our success going forward. Administrative efficiencies, much of this data comes from the SARS annual report, so I won't spend too much time on it. But what is concerning, as I referred earlier to, is the large amount of outstanding returns. Our debt that is ballooned to 150 billion, and the ballooning was the direct result of large business debt. Having said that, we've also been successful in reducing our credit book at the same time. In other words, clear a large part of refunds that were trapped in our credit book, and we reduced that by 12% over the past year. As was mentioned, we also normally embark on a whole host of revenue initiatives, and this year it added up to 25 billion. But I think most important, I think the reason why SARS has performed relatively well under very difficult circumstances is the absolute resilience and focus of our people and our staff members. Our staff has worked ceaselessly over this Easter weekend, and over those public holidays collected an additional 1.5 billion rand. So there might be some annoyed taxpayers out there, but we will buy them something nice to calm them down. We have also more effectively leveraged our regional structures to allow people to work across silos and to cooperate better. So our auditors are talking to our collectors are talking to our front office staff, and we find that to be key to make sure that we are optimal and that we remain optimal. Of course, going forward, there are many challenges that remain. I've briefly alluded to some of them. The challenge of large business that are not growing. The revenue from large business is flat, and that is concerning, and the acting commissioner has referred to that as an area of intervention. And then, of course, all the other areas that we've identified and that we'll go into a lot of soul searching going forward that we need to fix to be able to deliver the big amount of 1345 billion for the next year. As you can see, that will require a growth rate of 10.5% year on year. We will be getting some assistance from some of the tax proposals that were mooted. But basically, we need to get our act together and make sure that we close all those inefficiencies and make sure that we restore credibility so that we can also restore tax compliance. Like I said, most of this, or all this materials in your media will be in your media packs, and we will be engaging post this further if there should be any further questions. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Randall, for the insightful presentation in terms of the revenue results. Before we proceed to the questions and answer session, I've been duly advised by our health and safety colleagues that whenever a group is congregated in such a room, we need to ensure that we announce the health and safety standards, so to speak. But they've advised me just to indicate the fact that we have got 2 exits. Should anything untoward actually happen, we don't believe it will at any time, but we've got the exit in the center and the exit in the front. I almost feel like I needed a career in the airline industry just to direct you accordingly. But nevertheless, that was just for announcements purposes. We'll now open the floor for questions from the media, which will be responded to by our panelists, and support from the SARS Executive Committee, as well as our subject experts in various business units. So firstly, I'd just like the ushers, in terms of the microphones, to ensure that they are ready, both on the right and the left-hand side. Thank you. And then our colleagues from communications, in terms of scribing, to ensure that no question is left unanswered, that you can please ready yourselves to jot down those questions. In terms of the approach, we'll have 3 rounds of 3 questions each, and if need be, we'll consider whether there's a need to open up an additional round. So in terms of our colleagues from the media, when you do want to ask a question, please assist us in terms of indicating who you are, which media house you're coming from as well. Okay, a lady there, a lady there. Anyone more for the first round? Okay, we'll go with 3, so 3 ladies, Hillary as well. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. It's Mariam Issa from Finweek. My question, I think, is for the Minister. Since we have the upward revision to last year's growth rate, is there any change to the projected budget deficit for last year? And there are discussions going on about adding to the zero-rated VAT items. Are you at all concerned that the addition of more zero-rated items will make inroads into your projected revenues for this coming year? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, hello, Minister. I think my question is also directed to the Minister. I'm Renee Volkeraar from Bloomberg News. My question is pretty similar to Mariam's in that given that we now have preliminary revenue numbers for the 2017-18 fiscal year, can the Minister give us an indication maybe of how far off we'll be from the 4.3% deficit that was presented in the February budget for this just past fiscal year?
Thank you. The last one, Hillary.
A couple of questions for SARS, I would have thought. The first is just a practical question. For the past many years, we have had the presentation of these revenue outcomes on the 1st of April, and today is the 3rd, and I wondered what accounted for the delay. The second question I had to ask is... and we have, by the way, previously had results published on a Sunday, so I don't think it was merely the Sunday issue. Another question is, could could you detail the trend in the refunds? I may be wrong, but I don't recall you presenting the numbers net of refunds in the previous couple of years. So my question, in essence, is this are you presenting more transparent numbers, if you like, than have been presented to us in the past couple of years? Are the refunds higher? Does that mean that you have ceased to hold back refunds to flatter the figures, to be perfectly honest, as has been done in previous years? And just final question, the contraction in the dividends in March, was that because the previous year people were sort of upfronting the dividends, and that also sort of flattered the previous year's figures, and those were dividend taxes that should have come into this latest 2017-18 years. Thanks very much.
Thank you. If our panel is ready, we'll now ask the Minister to assist with
Thank you very much.
responses.
You know, when you said it'll be 3 rounds of 3 questions, some of the skilled and veteran journalists decided to ask more than 1 question, so that you have 6 questions, at a time. Well, but we will remain transparent enough not to say they shouldn't. But thank you very much for the questions. And Hilary, I hear you say at some point you did have results or revenue figures announced on a Sunday. We were just thinking for you. We thought you might not be available. It was all in good spirit. Let's wait for you guys to recover from it's a very long weekend, because it wasn't just, a day or 2, but poor Sars staff never stopped. They did work even during those days. But the numbers were already available. Mark was already sending the numbers, but we thought, let's give you a chance, guys. And that's why you're hearing your numbers. But indeed, Marian, the budget deficit numbers will be impacted positively, slightly, but very slightly. As you know, that there are other things to take into account, including also that our fiscal consolidation also looks at our expenditure as well. So there are quite a number of factors to take into account. We will be publishing a revised numbers after that. But at the moment, there's this very slight change. It's estimated at about 0.1%. It's very small. But there will be a formal official publication. She's unhappy with my response. Do you want to allow her to do that? No, allow her to raise that follow-up quickly.
Thank you very much. I was under the impression that if growth is more than expected, which it was, the ratio actually deteriorates because of the revenue being roughly the same and growth going up, purely a technical thing.
Well, yes, technically that's the number. But as I said, there are quite a number of other numbers to take into account. It's for that reason that I can't give you an outright answer now. We will just have to work that out, taking into account how that has panned out. Yeah. The zero-rated goods, we already have tasked the Davis Tax Committee to appoint a panel to deal with the zero-rated goods. But one of the things that I think we should also emphasize, because you also are the voice of the public, and when we talk in open spaces like this, I think we should also emphasize that perhaps consumer education becomes critical during times like this. I think we should now all begin to look at our trolleys when we load them. Start using your calculator to see exactly, one, whether you're buying things because you really need them, or you're just buying them because it was a good Easter weekend and it's nice to buy those nice things. But I think consumer education becomes critical, so that even the least that we had, we actually take full advantage of. And don't I don't want my basket as a poor South African to look like Luther's basket, you know. Allow Luther to load all these luxury goods, and I will actually go easy on the stuff that he buys, you know. And when he goes into the shop that sells his designer suits, I would rather defer to, you know, to the one that sells the more modest, that would suit me. But I think consumer education becomes critical on a more serious note. But we will await the outcome of the panel, and we are expecting them to work with speed to have full consultations and advisors accordingly. So this is on track, and I think, where's Momo? Who has, we have appointed the panel already, have we? Yes.
And we've also said the terms of reference will be published within the next week or two.
Yeah.
And the review will be within the fiscal framework that Parliament has already adopted.
Yeah. No, thank you. And yeah, perhaps I think the question from Bloomberg also was in line with the question that Marianne had asked. Again, we will actually be publishing the numbers officially. That will talk to how the numbers get impacted, how they change. I just hope that covers you. If it doesn't, you wanna. I see you are protesting very, very mildly.
Testing face on today, Minister. No, I mean, I was just thinking, given that we have the revenue numbers for the just past fiscal year, I mean, I understand that obviously there's a lot of reconciliation that still needs to be done on different sides. I mean, but I know sometimes in the past the Treasury has been able to give us, you know, an indication of we will be in line with what we said in February, or we will be quite a bit off from what we said in February. And I don't expect you to speculate. I was just wondering whether you've made the calculation to see, I mean, are we in line with what we saw in February?
Calculation has been made, but it's also not confirmed, and we think that if there is a change, it's going to be a very positive change. As I said, close to about 0.1%. That's what is, yeah, on the 4 point. I mean, moving from 4.6 to 4.5, around there. Yeah. We the same. The 2017-18.
It's also still preliminary, remember, Renee. The actual one is still going to come after the financial statements have been formally submitted in May. So, yeah.
Wants to hold me to it, even if I make the slightest mistake on this one.
I don't want to make a mistake, because I remember 4.3 estimate for 2017-18. That's why I'm just wondering, my memory is serving me correctly.
We'll verify the numbers. Momo, do you have the actual numbers?
I mean, though we don't like underspending, there is some underspending, so that's why you will get slightly lower deficit than budget, like 0.1.
Yeah, just to clarify, Hilary, it would have been impractical to do it on Sunday. We've still reconciling numbers. Obviously, we did have the numbers available. We could have called everybody. It is Easter weekend. I must say, very impractical to have Easter weekend over the end of the financial year. So that's just it was just for practicality purposes. No other reason, nothing sinister in that regard. Just in terms of the refunds, Randall will give a bit of background to that and give a bit of information, but it's a positive story, and I think we need to obviously inform and provide the detail in that regard. I'm sure the Ombudsman is also interested in those figures. With regards to the upfronting of dividends in the prior year, yes, there was definitely, we could see that, and there was a significant uptake in February prior to the budget of people declaring dividends prior to the increase in the dividend rate, which obviously has not flowed through in this the following year, and obviously that's a company's prerogative to declare a dividend at a certain time, and it's not something that's easy to estimate going forward. But yes, there was a shortfall in terms of that specific category, but we definitely did see some upfronting. Randall?
Mark, just Hilary, so we will be publishing, and we will be very transparent, the numbers net of refunds and refunds trends. But we also do that normally through Treasury, where the results get published a month later, but you'll get this result straight away. With regards, we're quite happy with the way the refunds have gone. As I've mentioned, we've managed to reduce our credit book by 12% from over the 2-year period. Our refunds are slightly ahead of the domestic VAT collections and import VAT collections, so that always speaks to that we are catching up, as we say, we are further ahead. But the detail we can make available if you want more detail on a month-on-month basis and stuff. But we are aiming to be a lot more transparent, so that we can be held to account.
Thank you very much. I think at the run rate that we were going at, Hillary and Co have exhausted round 2 and 3 of the Q&A session. I'm kidding. Can we now open up for the second round? We've got one lady there. Nobody else? We'll go with you, ma'am. If you can please stand, and just remember to announce your name and the media house you're coming from.
Sure. Modisa from Eyewitness News. I just wanted to ask about the inquiry that was set up last year by the former finance minister into Sars. Last we checked, we hadn't gotten any indication of the terms of reference, and we didn't. I wanted to find out from the finance minister as to whether you've been briefed on anything about this, and where we are, with regards to this.
Well, the President will shortly be actually finalizing that. It is in process. As you would know, we've been focusing on a number of other issues, but it is still in the offing. So we will be finalizing it quite shortly, once the President has concluded the process from his side.
I've noted the one lady there for her follow-up 5th question for today. So if she's the last one, we'll wrap it up with her. We'll give you an opportunity, ma'am.
Thanks very, very much. Compliance. It's deteriorated. What do you think are the reasons for that deterioration? Can you spell them out for us? My other question is sort of indirectly related to revenue collection, in that it feeds into it through the shake-up at SARS. When are we going to know the fate of the previous commissioner, Tom Moyane? Thank you.
Okay. I think in both our inputs with the acting commissioner, we did mention the issue of tax morality. That's but one of those of the reasons. In fact, we do need to strengthen our administration. It's one of the things we're seized with, because at times all your initiatives reach a point where they are no longer as effective as you would expect them to, and you do need to beef them up. But perhaps Mark would want to add on that. On the previous, on the commissioner's matter, again, I'm not comfortable with referring questions to the president, because again, that's delegating upwards. But that's the matter that the president is seized with, and we pray and hope that that matter will be concluded quite expeditiously, because we do want certainty in that space.
Just in terms of compliance, compliance is of deep concern to us specifically, and I think Randall highlighted with regards to pay-as-you-earn and VAT, the so-called agents taxes, as we would reference. What drives that? There's many facets. So if in my engagement with various tax-paying communities, some of it is driven, we need to acknowledge, by perceptions with regards to SARS, We need to acknowledge that. Some of it's driven by other perceptions within the country. Some of it's economical, and that we are finding many people in terms of the pay-as-you-earn side are actually using that money as part of their cash flow to fund their businesses, and we're definitely seeing that happening. On the side that what we can do about it is the key thing, and really we are geared towards firstly education and service, and we believe a good service will encourage people to comply. And that's for us an imperative. But obviously it comes to hauling the whip out as well. And I think we do need to review the whole regime of administrative penalties that are there for non-submission of returns. Currently it's only in place insofar as personal income tax is concerned. We need to look at what we're going to do to enforce the submission of returns of VAT and pay-as-you-earn and company tax returns. And really it is unacceptable when you start looking at the number of company returns, and these are legal entities that are simply ignoring their obligations. We need to enforce that. And we need to also work with the various departments within the justice cluster to see how we use their systems, because to not pay your pay-as-you-earn is a criminal offence, and we need to understand that, and we need people to be aware of that. But the first leg, and I always emphasize this, that is one of education, and we need to educate the public again of their obligations. So it's a journey for us, but we believe if we can get on top of it, we believe that we will be able to provide the Minister with the necessary resources that the country needs for going forward. But we do need to get on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Acting Commissioner. I just want to check with our panel if there's any further closing remarks from any of the panelists. Okay. None. With that being said, thank you very much for the questions to our media colleagues. Thank you to our SARS colleagues, as well as our invited guests for joining us for this very important occasion. We'll now bring it to a close, but before we do, I'd like to just make announcements in terms of the next steps going forward. We will be having scheduled interviews with the Acting Commissioner as well as Dr. Randall Carolson hereafter. So in terms of our media colleagues getting guidance as to where those are taking place, I'd like you to engage with two of my colleagues, namely Janine on the right-hand side, on my right, and Sandile on the left, and they will direct you as to where those are taking place. And before we actually begin with those